Now it's time for our U.S. Report regular, former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thanks so much for coming on the U.S. Report again this week. Great to have you back. Want to jump right into the news here today. Former Trump White House advisor Peter Navarro has been convicted of criminal contempt of Congress for failing to comply with a congressional subpoena related to the January 6th and 2020 election probe. Now, tell us about this. You worked with Peter Navarro. What are your thoughts on what's happening here? Is this a miscarriage of justice, or is this the right thing?
Listen, there's a lot of miscarriages of justice right now in my country, James. I don't think this is one of them. Here's what happened. The January 6th committee asked Peter to show up, Mr. Navarro to show up and testify. And instead of showing up to testify and say, look, I can't testify because of executive privilege, he did not show up. And then when he was charged, he said, look, the president told me not to show up. And when they asked him, can you show us something where the president told you not to show up, he couldn't do it. So Peter's had a difficult couple of months. There's no question about it. This went about as badly for him as it possibly could. There's a chance he goes to jail here for 2 years, mostly because he just didn't show up to say, I can't testify.
Well, but aren't a lot of people going to look at this and say, and I get what you're saying, you have to show up when Congress gives you a subpoena, and that's absolutely fair. But an awful lot of people are going to look at the treatment that's being handed to him and a number of other people around this and compare that to the way, people who were involved with Black Lives Matter riots, the burning of police stations, the attacks on the White House in 2020. All of these things are going to say, this looks like there's a bit of a double standard here. Is there a danger that we're going to see that?
Yes and no, and here's why I think this is just Peter is his own worst enemy in this particular circumstance. If Mr. Navarro had shown up and said, look, I'm here, I can't testify because the president told me not to, I don't think he goes to jail. It was the fact that he didn't show up at all. Why he didn't, I don't know. Apparently the judge and the jury didn't know either. So listen, what you just described is absolutely right. Is there a double standard right now in this country? There's no question about that. I'm not sure this is the poster child for that case. I don't know why Mr. Navarro did not show up. Sometimes Peter used to work for me, James, and I got to tell you, sometimes Peter just thinks he's smarter than everybody else. And in this particular circumstance, he wasn't. So as is so often the case, sometimes it's not what you do, it's what you do afterwards that gets you in trouble. It's not the crime, it's the cover-up. And the simple fact that Peter Navarro didn't show up may land him in jail for a couple of years.
That's as you say, not the crime is cover-up. That is ancient Washington wisdom. But let's move on then to other crimes or alleged crimes and misdemeanors. The first court hearing in Trump's Georgia case this week, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office has said it's planned a 4-month-long trial with more than 150 witnesses, while defense attorneys for 2 of the defendants, pro-Trump lawyers Kenneth Chesborough and Sidney Powell, argued that their cases should be severed from the other defendants. Walk us through a bit of the legalities of this. How does this, though, wind up playing as Donald Trump mounts the campaign for the nomination, which he seems to have in the bag, but then really, again, the more important thing, convincing the American people that he's worthy of a return to the White House?
Yeah, well, the big thing here is, of course, if the prosecution is right, this is going to take 4 months. What that means is Donald Trump is going to effectively be off the campaign trail for 4 months, which is what a lot of Republicans. Listen, I'm a critic of the president sometimes. I'm a supporter of the president sometimes. That's my job as the chief of staff. But I got to tell you, this looks more and more political. Keep in mind, there's another case going forward that's going to start on the day before Super Tuesday, which is a big primary date. If you were trying to make the case that the Democrats are politicizing this process, there's plenty of evidence to that end. And one of them is the fact they think this is going to take 4 months. So look, the president has done the former president has done a pretty good job of convincing people there's political motivation here, and he's probably not wrong. Might he have done something wrong? I think that's possible, but is this politically motivated? I think there's a growing body of evidence that it absolutely is.
Absolutely right. Now, finally, I want to ask you about Vice President Kamala Harris, who has insisted that she's ready to take over from the president if anything, God forbid, happened to the president and he fell ill and couldn't carry on running the country. Have a little listen to this.
You feel prepared for that possibility, and serving as vice president prepared you for that job?
Yes, but Joe Biden's going to be fine, so that is not going to come to fruition.
Now, Mick, I've got to ask you this here. This is what we've been saying on this show for a long time. I've been saying that I think Joe Biden's going to get swapped out. Is this Kamala making her case? No. Keep Joe on the ticket here for November so that sometime in the next term I get the big job.
Yeah, look, I think what even the Democrats know is she's not up to the job. There is a growing discussion here, especially amongst Democrats, James, that Biden might not be up to the task, that he might lose to Trump. And of course, that's his primary job, is beating Trump. And if the Democrats start to think he might lose to Trump because he's perceived as being too old and incapable, they will look to replace him. I haven't heard a single Democrat say, let's replace him with Kamala Harris. They're talking about Gavin Newsom. They'll talk about various senators. They'll talk about the governor of Colorado. But Kamala Harris's name never really comes up in that conversation. So that says even more about how the Democrats feel about her than how the Republicans feel about her. So, no, I think it's 50-50 at this point that Biden is actually the Democrat nominee because he is being perceived more and more as being beatable by Donald Trump, and that is unforgivable in the Democrat camps. But I just don't hear anybody saying, and you know what, we need Kamala Harris on that ticket instead of Joe Biden. That conversation is not taking place in Washington, D.C., and it's not taking place in the broader country either.
Mick Mulvaney, I think that line there, it's 50-50 now. I think that is the top news line of this interview. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Mick. Really appreciate it.